We will basically continue from the discussion we had in the last class. And if you remember, we uh, discussed all these concepts in the ADC driver by which we were trying to interface analog sensors using an ADC, analog to digital converter. And we are trying to look at different strategies to make this sensing exercise more efficient, right? Because in any IoT based system, we want to put as much we want to put make the code density as high as possible, number one, and number two is that we want to put as much free time that is possible to the CPU, because that free time could be used for other modules, right? Like we cannot use the entire CPU for sensing just one sensor. There could be multiple sensors, and there could be significant amount of computation we would like to perform on that particular IoT device. So we were talking about some of the concepts in that direction. So this was about the thing we discussed last time, and we discussed particularly the polled design, where we had to wait and check on a particular flag in the ADC status and control register, and we discussed what are the inefficiencies of the polled design in details, right? So this was inefficient, right? And the reason being, we had this busy wait where we were checking a particular flag whether the conversion has completed or not, right? So there was a particular flag called start conversion, and this one we were waiting to for checking that whether it becomes 0 or not, right? If we put a value of 1, it starts converting, and if it is 0, the conversion has finished. So in this way, we were knowing that the data that was coming from the analog sensor is written to the two registers we had. If you recall, that was this ADC high and low register, and depending on how we set the ADLAR, the left adjust result bit, we can read the results from this particular two registers. Okay, so please try to implement these things on your own, right? Because many of you wanted to have a flavor of how to program a little bit in the lower level, right? This embedded system. So it will give you some idea to start with, and this will be a foundation, right? And then you can explore much more complicated things based on more features that are available on a microcontroller. You can read up the data sheet and other features that are available. They're nicely documented, but at least some of these concepts you should try to implement on your own. Okay, and this is one of the status registers, right? There is another status register B. So this ADC register A is one of the primary registers that will be used for all these ADC conversions, right? And if I just recall, the last 3 bits was used for the loading the prescaler. Then there was this ADSC, the start conversion, and then there is this enabling the particular hardware, right? And we are going to cover more quickly. So the other option was to keep the CPU not busy, as we saw in the polling strategy, and that is by something called interrupts, right? We are going to discuss more on what is an interrupt and so on. And if you see in the figure, if we look at the CPU clock, let's say the request came at a particular point in time. So I have marked that with this red circle. Right? So there was a particular point in time when there was an instruction in your code that asked for a digital sample from the ADC or from the analog sensor, right? And then please note that there will be some time that will be wasted before the actual conversion starts. So the actual conversion will start in the leading edge of the ADC clock. So because of the prescaler divide, we will get a much reduced clock rate in case of the ADC. So there is this prescaler divide here, and typically we can use this value of, let's say, 128, and so you'll basically get a much reduced clock rate, right? It's almost like it's 128 times lower. So you will basically, in the worst case, you can waste something like 127 CPU clock cycles, right? So because the CPU clock is going at a much faster rate, so you will sort of waste this time before the actual conversion starts. Okay, and once the conversion starts, what we were doing is wait till the end of conversion, because in this particular part we were waiting in a busy loop, so the CPU was busy. And once the conversion ends, we know this has ended from the while loop. That was our old design, and this is the time that was used for the conversion. So one is the initial part that was wasted before the conversion actually started. So this is till here, and then we actually had this typical 13 ADC clock cycles. So in this figure, it is not drawn to scale. This is just for the ease of understanding, but it's not one or two clock pulses, but for this particular ADC with 10-bit resolution, it will be about 13 ADC cycles, right? ADC clock cycles. Okay, so CPU was busy for this amount of time, and now what we can do is that we can just use this concept called interrupts, where we can ask the ADC to start conversion and then do other tasks that are required in our system. And then once the conversion ends, we could be notified about that end of conversion. That is also possible. So in that case, we will free up the CPU time. Okay, so we will free up this CPU time, and it will be used for doing other tasks, right? We don't want to keep the system unnecessarily busy for doing this, right? So that is the concept of interrupt here. Okay, so we want to get notified, and once there is a notification that the interrupt has taken place, which means the end of conversion of the ADC has taken place, the program automatically jumps to a certain function which we call interrupt service routine. It's called interrupt service routine. I will talk in more details about this. It's called interrupt service routine, right? This is very uh, like routinely taught in any operating systems class or a microprocessor class, right? So you want to serve the particular interrupt, you want to do something when the interrupt has taken place, or in this case, in this particular case, the ADC has told that the conversion has been completed. So you want to read the results, or you want to make the code know that your conversion has been completed, so that you initiate the next conversion. Okay, so this is a typical way things are done. So you basically request your code to read from the ADC and then keep on doing other stuff. And whenever the conversion has taken place, it will automatically raise this flag wherever that interrupt service routine has to be executed. And this will be done automatically, because whenever the system knows that the interrupt has taken place, it will automatically go and execute the instructions that are written here. Right? And this is typically not a very large or piece of code. This is typically few instruction. You want to keep the interrupt service routine as small as possible, because if you keep the interrupt service routine long, there could be other interrupts that could come in, and we might miss that. Right? We don't want to spend too much of CPU clock cycles inside the interrupt service routine. Right? So that is something that is well understood even if you take something in OS or any other microprocessor code, right? That has nothing to do with specific to ADC, right? Any interrupt service routine that you write, don't write the code very in a large way, right? You want to make that code small. Okay. So now I want to give a little bit more formal exposure to interrupt, right? So some of you might I already have a background on interrupts, but I just, for the sake of completeness, anyway, I want to touch up on the concept of interrupt a little bit, and then look at other kinds of interrupts that are available in this kind of a microcontroller, and how we can use them, right? Let's say reading from a serial device and so on. Okay. So the first thing I want to give you an example of is like a toy example, right? It's a very simple example just for you to understand how this thing works. So let's say you have a board with two LEDs, right? This is LED 1, which is turned off, and the other one is, the red one, is another LED which is turned on, right? And let's say you want to push a toggle button. So there is a button like this that you can like you have driven the button in this direction, which basically changes the state of the two LEDs, right? The red LED turned off, and there is another LED, the green one, that turned on, and this continues, right? If you again toggle the button, so you basically flipped the position of the switch from this left hand side to right hand side, and it basically goes back to the same state. Very simple system, right? You just toggle a button and your system changes or flips the which LED is on, right? And let's say you want to implement this, right? Like let's say we can try to implement this in a naive way, where we don't know much about all these interrupts and all, and we can see that what kind of problems might arise and what is the necessity of using these concepts or using these facilities that are provided by the microcontroller hardware. So this is the circuitry where we have the toggle button. So there are 4 buttons, but we are not using these buttons in this particular example. So I just happen to have this keyboard. I am just using only one button, and just assume that it is possible to register that whether this button has been clicked or not, right? This goes to a digital input output port, and we can try to know from the value, we can figure out whether that button has been pressed or not. Okay, so this is, we are just using only one button, the red one on the left hand side, and we have, as shown in the figure, 2 LEDs. So once this is in the green state, this particular LED turns on, and once you toggle that one more time, it basically goes back to the red state, right? So there are these 2 LEDs, red and green. So this is just a very simple circuit, right? That, and we are sending all these instructions to the Arduino, and then doing the decision making there, right? It is the code that is running in the Arduino that is reading the inputs from the switches, and then based on that, it is taking a decision and turning on that particular LED. So the entire state machine that we are talking about is maintained in software. Okay, although we can have a very easy solution to this without any microcontroller, just having this LED directly connected to the toggle switch can serve this purpose. But in this case, we are trying to understand the very concept of what kind of overhead a software driven the state machine can have, right? So that we have a better idea about why interrupts might be needed. Okay, so this is the code. Simple code. I did not use any register addresses and so on, just for you to understand. So there are this 2 outputs. These 2 outputs are for the 2 LEDs. So this is for LED 1, which could be green or red. I don't remember from here. And then there it would be another LED, and this is for the toggle button, right? And what is this pin mode doing? This is basically setting up the DDR registers, right? If you remember from classes in the very beginning, what we talked about was this DDR, the data direction register. It could be B, C, or D depending on which pin we are trying to access. But this basically sets up the DDR, the data direction, to be 1 or 0, depending whether we are using that as an output or an input, right? If it is an output, we are probably putting a value of 1 on that particular pin for a given port. Okay, so that is what this thing is doing. And then it's very simple. This is very similar to that blink example that we went through. So whenever the flag is 0, we are putting off or turning off one LED. So we are trying to do a digital write of low, which is setting a value of 0 in the data register, and putting a value of 1 on that particular pin in the same data register. Okay, and we are just using the same port here for the digital writes, and same for if the flag is 1, we are doing the other way around, right? We are basically turning off the other LED and turning on the LED that is connected to the 12th pin. So exactly the opposite thing we are doing. This is implementing the states whenever the flag changes, the flag flips, right? And then there is another simple thing we are doing. We are basically checking the value of that second pin where we are pressing the button. If it basically becomes 0 when there is a key press, So we are detecting whether there is a key press or not. And if there is a key press, we are basically flipping the flag. If it was 0, we are making it 1. If it was 1, we are making it 0, right? So as you see, we will try to show you how this particular piece of code performs, and I have taken a video for this. You can, this is the naive implementation, and I have marked the green and the red ones in the figure, right? Let's see what happens. So there is, it is showing something as expected, but see, there is a problem here, right? Sometimes what happens is, even if I'm pressing the switch, it doesn't toggle nicely. It's just, we saw that the red LED was on for more time, right? In this case, it's not working as expected, right? Hope we could understand that that switching was not that smooth, right? For example, if you see in some of these cases, even if we are pressing the switch, there is an irregularity in how the LEDs are turned on successively. It's definitely not green to red and red to green. It's definitely not working like that, but there are some glitches. Okay, so that is where we have to understand. This is basically setting up the context where we might need some other methodology, right? And we have to understand, first of all, why the naive implementation was not working, right? What is the problem with this naive implementation? Okay, so this was our code, right? And anybody would care to explain what was going on, because this is the loop that it was an infinite loop, right, that runs, and all we are doing is pressing this button and this code is running, right? What is going on, or what is the problem with this code? Anybody? Yeah, if you send me through chat, it's kind of difficult for me to see. If you happen to have a microphone, you can say. Any guess?
If condition digital read 2, the default value will come in, sir, if we are not toggling in the same time span.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there is not a default value, but like we are setting we are just reading the value of flag here, right? So
Yes, sir.
flag is either 0 or 1. What's the code issue here? The code issue here is that we are probably missing some of the reads, right? So see how the program is executed. So this loop is the infinite loop part of the entire code. The setup is executed only once, as you know. And here what is going on is, look at these three parts of the entire code, right? So the digital read is only called, this is just one part of the set of instructions when it is executed. So these are the series of instructions. Is a series of instructions. If you really want to look at the assembly code, you will see there is a series of instructions, and within that there is only one instruction that is trying to read the value that is set in pin number 2. Okay, and it's not that our program counter is stuck there, right? The program counter is going through all these instructions one after the other, right, based on that clock. And whereas this thing can happen anytime, right? This is something that I am doing from the external world without any sync up with the microcontroller, right? This is an external world thing, right? I in my wish I can press the button anytime I like, and it might not be that your program counter is resting in that particular location at that particular point in time, right? It could be here, right? In that case, what will happen is whatever you press, right, it doesn't matter, because it is not going to read your input at that particular point in time. So you will basically miss this in many cases, and that is what was happening. Okay, and so what we saw is a entire effect, right? Right, sometimes you miss, but sometimes you are fortunate enough to hit this particular instruction whenever you are pressing that button. But this is the issue with this code. And to remove this issue, right, this is one example I gave you. But this kind of sets of the context where we need something more than this, right? You cannot expect the computer or the controller to be at the same location in the code where you are trying to read these external inputs, right? Or any other, even there is something that happens randomly that it is not predetermined in your code. How do you handle those kind of situations? And for that we have this thing called interrupts, and one of them is how we can handle external interrupts. int0 and int1, there are these two pins where we can interface such switches, right, by which we can stop the code at a certain point in time and then jump to the interrupt service routine that I was talking about earlier. Right? So it doesn't matter that whether it is even executing sequentially, and it is not in this particular location. The program counter is not in this particular location when the key is pressed. Doesn't matter. We have a different way to solve this problem, and the different way is known as how the hardware in the microcontroller handles this interrupts. So interrupt is basically, it is interrupting the normal flow or the normal execution of the series of instructions in the code. Whatever we are doing, it will be interrupted, and you need to serve that particular interrupt using a certain function called the ISR, or the interrupt service routine. Okay, so in this particular microcontroller, there happens to be these two external interrupt pins where you can attach external hardware. A switch could be an external hardware that could be pressed, and irrespective of whatever your program inside the microcontroller is doing, the attention of the code will turn to handling the interrupt service routine at the specific point wherever you have pressed it, right, in time. Okay, so we want to make this response as quick as possible and as real time as possible. Okay, so that is the intention of having this interrupt service routines. So how to do it? So there is a specific way, there is a specific grammar for doing this, right? And the way it is done is something called attach interrupt, which basically tells the system in the very beginning that please expect interrupts that will come through to pin number 2. So we can expect interrupts, and that will be interrupted through pin number 2. So this is just the nomenclature we follow in Arduino. So, but the general thing you can look up, right? If you have to program this in C, there are ways to declare this thing. So the way the code that we are presenting here is specific to this Arduino platform, right? But the concept is the same. The syntax might be a little bit different when we try to attach an interrupt with a specific pin, and the signature of this particular function is like this. First is we declare which pin we are associating this particular interrupt with. The next one is the function name of the interrupt service routine. So this is the ISR, and then this could be, there could be many things while you look at the state of the particular pin, right? In this example, this is pin number 2. So it could be any change, right? It could be from high state to low state, right? High to low. It could be the rising edge, right? If it is only from low to high, then only you raise an interrupt, otherwise not. Or it could be even a falling edge. So if it is only changing from low, high to low, so this is high and it is changing in this direction from high to low, then only you do raise an interrupt. Or it is a rising edge. If it is from low to high, then only you raise an interrupt. So you can program that also. From an external interrupt, you can also look at the state of that particular switch, right? Whether it is switching from high to low or it from low to high, or you can make it agnostic, right? Even if there is any change, you can just say I want to raise an interrupt. Okay, and then whenever in the code, whenever this thing happens, right, irrespective of what you do in the loop, right, doesn't matter. Whenever there is this key press, this interrupt will be raised and it will immediately come to this particular ISR, right? So this will be executed. And the idea is to not do a lot of work here, because this will may trouble other interrupts to be read by the system. So you don't want to put the system for a longer time inside the ISR routine. Okay, that I already explained once. So we just want to do the flip of the flag. So the flag is flipped, and then we can just transfer the flow in the loop, right? Just the load of the other computational load, right, is already executed inside this loop program, inside the loop function, where we just simply, depending on the value of flag, we are just setting the proper LEDs to be on or off, and then we are free to do other computation work, right? So this entire time is we are free to do something else, right? We can process other interrupts. For example, let's say we want to have two switches. One could be for just turning on the LED, like green LED, and the other switch could be for turning on the red LED, right? In that case, you have to attach two interrupts, right? So those kind of things can also be implemented. So that is the basic idea. We don't want to keep the CPU tied up for a long amount of time, or do something like polling that we have like we have seen in the very beginning. So the proper way to address this problem is using interrupts, and the grammar to do this, or the syntax to do this, is like this. You can choose how to attach the interrupt, and then you have to implement the interrupt service routine. And what I would come to later is there are some standard interrupt service routine based on which particular peripheral or which particular pin is raising the interrupt. So there are some standard set of ISRs available inside the microcontroller. So for that, you have to refer to the data sheet, that what are the different kinds of interrupts and so on. Okay. And now if the interrupts are enabled, we can quickly check that in this case, the transition is pretty smooth. Okay, it's the same code, it's the same functionality, but there is no glitch, right? There is no repetition or non-toggling, right? Every time I press that particular key, it nicely toggles. Okay, so this gives you some idea why interrupts will be necessary.
Okay. Sir, in the previous code, you wrote that change, right? I mean, when you're pressing it for that second, that's one change, and when you're removing it away, it's another change. So it should double click. It should double click, right? So it should either be something like, I should only count it while it's being clicked or while it's being removed. But now we are doing
yeah. So see, any change is fine. So whenever this particular button is clicked, it actually creates that that particular kind of a pulse. It is specific to this particular switch. But if you this is not a toggle switch, right? But if you happen to have something like that can preserve that particular state once you press it, so the code is written in that fashion, right? Once you press that, it will be continuously in the high state. Once again you press that, it will continuously be in the low state. Okay, does it make it clear?
Yes.
Because see, there could be two options. One could be once you toggle the switch, it was from the low state, it will go to the high state and keep on in the high state. And once you press that button one more time, then it will come to the low state again. Okay, so this is done, and then this is to introduce a lot of different interrupts that would be available. So if you are using any microcontroller, not specifically this Atmega 328, any sort of microcontroller you will be using, you will have this series of interrupt service routines that are available ready-made. Okay, and these are the different definitions that we have. In this case, there are these two external interrupt requests. So you can hook up two switches to this particular microcontroller, and then there is something called pin change interrupt request, right? So this is somewhat similar but not exactly similar. I can explain when I come to that. I'll also go over this particular concept. And then there are other things. One is this ADC, right? So this is something we were supposed to look at, that whenever the ADC conversion completes, there is a way to raise an interrupt flag, and if we know that the interrupt has been raised, we can serve that particular ISR. We can implement a ISR for this particular function, right? So this will be raised when the conversion has been completed. Okay, And then there are other peripherals. For example, this analog comparator is another peripheral. So you can program all these things such that it can raise a particular interrupt. There are timers. So today, this time probably it will not be possible to cover the timer right now. So maybe once we start a little bit more on the sensing side, we will try to see if we can, how we can produce some pulses and so on. So in that time, we will cover timers and so on. So that also has this series of different kinds of interrupts. Whenever there is a particular value that is matching in the counter, you can raise an interrupt and so on, right? So you can take a look at it, but yeah, there are some involved things inside depending on what you want to do, what are the different things it can achieve and so on. And then there are other things for serial communication, EEPROM, this is the TWI, the two-way interface, or I2C bus, right? So there are different. Then there is this SPI. So you can take a look at it, right? In the data sheet, it is available, and what they mean, right? For our case, we can use this, right, for, let's say, interfacing some external switches and so on. So this could be really helpful. Okay. And this is, again, we are coming back to the set of registers we were using for controlling the ADC in the microcontroller. And just to recap, we are using first the ADC multiplexer register, choosing the sources, then choosing the input sources, then choosing the reference sources. Then we were loading the prescaler in the SRA register. Then after that, we were basically enabling and then starting the conversion. If we start the conversion, it will keep on working on for 13 clock pulses for the ADC, and then once the conversion has completed, this will be cleared, this particular flag will be cleared, and then we can declare the result is done, and the result will be written in these two registers. So this is clear, right? And at least we have seen a polled strategy to do that. We are particularly polling on this this particular bit to know whether the conversion has completed or not. Now we want to see that how can you make the CPU time free. Let's not be busy waiting on that particular bit, wasting my CPU resources. We want to do it a little bit in a smarter way, and for that we want to use or see how interrupts could be used. Okay, so for that, the status register A also gives you two more bits, right, that you can manipulate, or that you can actually set in order to use this feature, right? What is the feature? Whenever the end of conversion has taken place, it should raise an interrupt. Okay, so that is already a functionality that has been provided in the hardware, and we should be knowledgeable about that particular thing, right? If not, we will keep on using that polled strategy, right? But the hardware gives you, the microcontroller gives you an avenue in order to explore or exploit that particular interrupt for the ADCs, then why not use it? Okay, so these are the things you should the data sheet or the manual becomes very handy when you try to implement. There could be a certain microcontroller where this functionality might be missing. Of course, in 99.99% of the microcontroller, this ADC functionality will be there. But just as an hypothetical example, I'm trying to put in very resource constrained thing where I don't have that many registers and so on, maybe this functionality is missing and you have to do a polled design. Okay, but if there is something like this, we should always take an advantage, and for that reason you should look at the particular registers in more details, right? What are the things that this particular microcontroller gives you? What are the different hardware functionalities that you should be aware of? And these are the two bits now that comes handy if you are using the end of conversion interrupt. Okay, and the same status register, the ADC SRA. And there are two ways we normally do conversion whenever you are reading from an analog sensor. There could be two things, right? One is, depending on your necessity, you want to read a single sample, which is known as a single conversion mode. Okay, because in your application, you might not need the digital values for the analog sensor all the time. right? Maybe there is a certain event, and based on the response to that particular event, I want to check the analog sensor now. Only in that case, you want a single value or a couple of values, right? So there is one way to implement this, and the other, through interrupt, of course. And the other way that is allowed in the system is known as the free running mode, where you keep on getting the samples and keep on processing them. Okay, so these are the two strategies in which the reading of the digital values can be implemented. Okay, so depending on your necessity. So many of the programs you will see that comes with the different drivers, right? There are example programs. If you buy a certain hardware, they will give you some libraries, and that will have an example code for reading that particular sensor. They might not specify, right, in what kind of context you are designing that particular software or using that particular sensor. All they might have is how to configure their registers in their hardware and then just draw data out of it, right? They will not have much in most of the cases, they will not have much context in what situation you are trying to design this particular driver. Okay, so that you have to be careful about, both to save power as well as to make your code more efficient, right? So ADC, by by the way, might take up some considerable amount of power, right? So you have to be very judicious in looking at whether you want to keep the ADC on or off. You don't want to keep on converting samples when you don't need it. Okay, particularly if you are running the IoT system out of a battery, if it is battery powered, or even there are IoT devices that runs on harvested energy. So you have to be super judicious about in which mode you want to run the ADC in. So all you have to do is enable the interrupt. So there is this ADIE flag, and then start the conversion. So last time what we were doing, where we were not paying attention to this particular feature of enabling the interrupt. So we are just trying to only set the start conversion flag, whereas we are trying to do both interrupt enable as well as the ADSC bit, which is starting the conversion. So what this will do is it will basically raise this particular ISR routine, which is referred by the ADC underscore VECT. So this is the syntax you need to follow. So the name of all these particular functions are already provided in your that interrupt service routine table that I showed you 2-3 slides back, right? So this is where you have to implement what you want to do. Okay, so it could be, you can even read from the registers, but you want to keep it as small as possible, right? But possibly you can read the particular value out of this ADC HNL registers, right? And all you want to declare, if ADC done is a global variable, right, in your code or in that loop, all you want to do is declare that the ADC reading is done, right? That's all you want to flip the flag off, right? Otherwise, this ADC done could be perpetually in the false mode. Only when there is a conversion that is required, whenever the conversion is finished, I just make the ADC done is equal to true and read the value, and then I can make it false again, where I am handling a reading of the value. Okay, so we are only going to attempt reading the value only when this ADC done is true, and that we can check at a very high frequency. You don't have to do a busy wait. Right, we can in the loop we can do other functions, and just we can have a if condition saying that if ADC done is true, then process the result, or I can actually proceed with other sensing tasks. Okay, so this is one way by which I can make use or exploit this particular interrupt facility that the ADC registers give us. Okay, so now we have known most of the bits. We are familiar with most of the bits in the ADC SRA register. Enable is sort of done. SC, you know how it starts conversion. Interrupt enable is known, and these are the prescalers. Okay, and we'll look at the other things also in course of time. So one thing I would ask you to do is then have a complete working code for this, right? I have already told you the main details, what are the things that you need to set and all, but you can just implement the same thing for temperature sensing. The way we showed you the complete example while we are doing the pole design. Now in this case, we are not having the pole design, but we are having this interrupt service routine separately implemented outside loop function, where it is going to be serviced whenever there is an end of compute or end of conversion. So that you completely understand what is going on, it is best to implement this on your own and then just see whether you are getting legitimate results or not, right? At least for temperature sensor, it's very easy to cross verify, right? Whether you are getting junk values or not, it's easy to do. And I would request you to complete this particular code so that you get a little bit more confident about implementing such codes. So this is sort of important in any driver development for IoT systems. Okay, so the other thing I spoke about was, apart from the single conversion mode, there is another mode called free running mode. So what is free running mode? This will keep on reading values by setting this particular enable bit, right? What will happen is, once it reads a particular value, it will again set the value of, it will again enable the interrupt and keep on doing it, right? In the earlier case, it is just that we read one value and then after that you have to again enable the interrupt and read more values. That was a single conversion mode. And there is this free running mode where there is something which is known as trigger, right? It will keep on triggering. So it is called trigger enable. Okay, so and this trigger will be enabled as a response of certain thing, and that certain thing is determined by the other register, which is the SRB register. Okay, so this is the SRB register. Till now we were just handling the ADC SRA register, but now we are looking at the SRB register, and the SRB register primarily is responsible for choosing where your interrupt is coming from, where your trigger enable is coming from. This is a trigger enable source. Okay, in the SRA register, you just tell that you want to trigger in the free running mode, you want to trigger the conversion as a result of something you want to programmatically trigger, let's say. In that case, how it will choose, right, as a response to which kind of trigger it will activate, the conversion will come from SRB register, and this is the list, right? And one of them is the free running mode, which keeps on getting the sample and converting the sample. Okay, this will be still based on interrupts, but when it will reinitiate the conversion, it could just simply be, once the one conversion is complete, immediately it will start the next conversion. Okay, and there are other modes also. Let's say you want to have a timer. In this case, you can have a scheduled design. Let's say you want to count from 0 to 100, and every time the counter reaches the value of 100, then you can start one conversion, and again you can reset the timer and again count from 0 to 100, right? So these implementation details I'll come later, not today, but you can just have these things in mind. It is possible to have a counter driven trigger, right? If you see counter 0 compare match a could be a particular value, right? And B could be a particular value. So let's say it is going to start from 0 to 100. It reaches the value of 100, and again it is reset. Again it goes from 0 to 100. Again it is reset. Again, like this, right? And every time its value reaches 100, it is going to be a match with a particular preset value. Let's say match A. So A could be 100, and then this is going to trigger a conversion. Clear? And similarly, the simplest thing is the free running mode, where it is keep on doing the conversion. There could be other things. For example, the external interrupt request. For example, you can press a button, and only when you press a button, it is going to read the analog sensor. So there is no point in keep on reading the analog sensor. When you are pressing a button in the way I showed you earlier, then only you can read, otherwise not. Analog comparator is basically going to compare in the analog domain. So let's say you have the analog signal coming in, and then you want to compare it with whether it is greater than, let's say, 2.7 volts, right? And this can go to the analog comparator. Okay, and then if it is greater than 2.7 volt, only then, right? If it is greater or lesser, it is going to do the comparison, and only if it is greater than 2.7, then only, if it is yes, then only you do the ADC conversion, or if it is no, I don't want to, no ADC, nothing. Okay, so this is going to raise an interrupt. So these are different ways you can enable the trigger. Okay, you can program them from the software. If you have other components in your IoT system, there are some inputs, outputs, or there are some other things like you want to schedule at a regular interval of time, then in those cases you can use this particular ADATE flag in the SRA register, and then based on what are the facilities we have in the SRB register, these are the several trigger sources that you can specify is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and you can have something out of these. Okay, and how you can control the time in the timer, there is, you can pre-program then what is the rate of counting. If you know the rate of counting, you can know that how long it will take to count from 0 to 100, because you know at what hertz that particular, or what frequency that particular counter is operating at. So you can figure out that what is the time delta t, every delta t it is going to trigger a conversion. So you can pre-program that depending on how frequently you want to trigger the timer. You have to find out what value of a you should load in the counter. What should be the value of a? You know the counting rate, so you know how long it will take to count from 0 to n, and then n you have to find out and load into the program counter. Load into the counter, not program counter. Okay, so this is about the free running mode. And any questions still here? Okay. So there is one more thing I just wanted to mention as a side note, is there is a way to reduce the amount of noise in the ADC while you do the conversion. Because see, if you when you are converting, all of the other IO specific clock, the other peripheral clocks are all on, right? There are other things that are continuously on, and they somehow interferes with your ADC conversion by introducing some noise. Okay, so there is a register called sleep mode control register, and setting a particular value 001 actually helps you in reducing the amount of noise that is introduced in the ADC. Right, it will stop the CPU but allowing the ADC and the external interrupts. Okay, so that can also save considerable amount of power. As you can see in this example, it will take just to complete the conversion, it takes 13 ADC cycles, right? ADC clock cycles, which is like 13 multiplied by 128 CPU clock cycles, right? So this is not a bad idea to keep your CPU in the sleeping mode, and there are other things that you can also keep in the sleeping mode for that amount of time when the conversion is taking place, right? And not only that, it is also going to reduce the amount of noise that is introduced during the conversion. Okay, so it basically you can look at the manual for more details. It is going to halt the input output clock, the CPU clock, the clock that goes into the flash, and so on, right, while allowing other clocks to run. And there are more details in the manual, as I said. So this also improves the noise environment of the ADC, enabling higher resolution measurements. If the ADC is enabled, a conversion starts automatically when the mode is entered. So this is directly copied from the manual, and this is just to give you a pointer to how there are how you can increase the accuracy beyond whatever is available. So this feature is available in the microcontroller, so why not use it judicially, right? Once you need some feature like that, and at that point of time when the ADC is being serviced, you might not need other things, right? Depending on your application. If you really need to access other things, then there is a different story, right? But as long as you are not doing anything active during that time, you might consider this particular option. right? So again, in any other microcontroller, they also provide, they might provide a version of this particular option. So this is worth exploring. So this is just a pointer to you, so that you know that these kind of things are possible. Okay, so because power at the end of the day becomes a very important, like a crucial factor in any IoT systems, right? So the software that you are going to write can show a huge variation in power, the way you design this kind of drivers, right? Whether you are giving enough sleep to the CPU, whether you are having a pulled design, whether you are having an interrupt driven design, this will actually influence the amount of power that you are drawing. And so basically directly influences your life cycle, or the life of your IoT hardware, because it is battery powered. The amount of the time that it is going to run is limited, right? And you want to increase the lifetime of that particular device. So there are, these kind of things can help you, right? So if you want to know more, please look at I don't think the book has this thing, but you can look at the manual to know more about this particular thing, right? And the book has some decent amount of resources if you want to get the background of a certain thing. Let's say interrupt, right? You can go and read up what this interrupt means, particularly if you have not been introduced to these concepts earlier. You can read up, and that book has a nice description of most of these things, right? Starting from a background, and that will also give you a decent programming exposure. So they have some implementations that are available as examples. You can look at them. Okay, so as I told you, please read both the book as well as the manual. There is nothing to memorize. It is just that whether you understand the flavor, understand how it could be implemented, and if you happen to have Arduino device at your disposal, please try to make use of it and try to play with the control register. That's what I keep on repeating, because by looking at these registers, by putting different values in these registers, you can learn a lot about how these things are executed, right? Particularly when things like interrupts are there, it is kind of fun and a lot of learning that takes place if you do it on your own. It's not possible to cover everything, right, as a part of a theoretical class. And even if you happen to have a lab, right, that also is not exhaustive. So if you want to get a real flavor about how this embedded systems programming is done, right, and particularly in IoT system where you have to interface a lot of sensors, it's better to do it yourself and experiment with it. Okay, so I had a brief overview of the scheduled driver design. I already spoke about the rationale, how the timer could be used, but how to set the timers and so on, those details I can cover in some other class, right? So the timer programming, timer / counter programming, I will cover sometime later, where we might need to generate pulses for doing a certain kind of sensing, but you have the rationale, right, how it could be used. Okay, so now I will introduce you to a new kind of interrupt. So whatever time we have, I think we can cover a small portion of this thing. So there is something known as pin change interrupt, right, the PCINT. We already looked at the external interrupt, right, and we said that there is another kind of interrupt called pin change interrupt, which is pretty similar to the external interrupt, but there are some minor differences that I will also explain to you. Okay, so if you look at if you go back to the ports, right, and all these ports has these pins, right, and within all these pins there are these functionalities. Every pin can be used for raising this pin change interrupt, PCINT. Okay, this is very similar to that switch press, right, the button press that we have done, right? So for now, we can assume that you can interface so many pin change interrupts for all these pins, right? Of course, if you are using these pins for some other purpose, you will not have room for handling these many buttons or engaging these many pins. But whatever these pins are available, other than whatever is not being used, let's say you are not using this because you are using the I2C bus, or you are not using this because you are using the SPI bus, right? So the remaining things you have to design that in your own way. Maybe this will be interface to some kind of an analog sensor, so some sensor could be reading the data. So whatever is remaining would be used for interfacing some kind of interrupt request that you want to pass from the external world. Okay, and again, like the way we were manipulating the digital input output pins, right? There we had this DDR register and the data register and the in register. In that way, here also these ports, right, where you want to set up an interrupt, which pin will be used for setting up an interrupt, it has the similar nomenclature, right? So how is the nomenclature done? It's basically there is one interrupt called one register called the pin change interrupt, where any change that takes place in that particular pin will raise an interrupt. So this particular pin, let's say pin 12, right? If we attach some kind of a button with this pin 12, and if there is any change to that, right, doesn't matter whether it's high to low or anything, right, low to high, any change in that will be registered, and that is going to fire a particular interrupt, and you have to implement that interrupt. That is a separate question, but any change is going to fire an interrupt. And how it is done? It is first you have to select the port. So the first thing is the port selection. As you know, in this particular device we have these three ports, B, C and D, and there are certain pins that are associated with them. So first thing we do is select that particular port where we are going to implement the pin change register, pin change interrupt. So all these bits are not used, only the first three bits from 0, 1 and 2, these are used. So that is pin change interrupt enable. And if you set the first bit to 1 as shown here, it is going to turn on port B. If it is the middle bit, it is going to turn on port C and so on, right? So you can have any combination you feel like. So it is very similar to selecting a certain port, right? Whether a particular port will be used or not, and within that port whether the direction and all we had to specify, right? So within this, once you select a certain port, the next task is to select a pin, right? Within all these ports we have a set of pins and we have to select the pin. So it's the same thing. Earlier we had data like port B, port C and port D register, or DDRB, DDRC and DDRD register. Similarly, in this case we are using this pin change mask 0, 1 and 2, where 0 is the for port B, 1 is for port C and 2 is for port D, right? And using this series of bits we can basically select any particular pin for implementing the pin change interrupt. Okay, so first you have to select the port using that PCISR thing, the last register, and after selecting the port you have to select a certain pin using the PCMSK register, right? Whether it is B, C or D, it depends on which pin you want to select, right? So if you know which pin to select, you know which port, and based on that you can turn on that particular port, and then you can turn on enabling that particular pin for receiving the pin change interrupts. Okay, so these are the two things you just have to know if you want to deal with registering certain inputs from a certain pin. Okay, and then you can have based on the particular port that is going to raise these three interrupt service routines, right? So there is this PC INT0 vector, INT1 and INT2, depending on which that pin, that particular pin which raised that interrupt is coming from which port, right? So you have only three of them, and these are the two separate ones, right? The INT0 and INT1, these were already fixed. Okay, so this is a separate kind of interrupt, and then this is will be only for whatever we just discussed now, right? So do you observe something, any comments you have from here? Any observations? See, we had how many pins? We had so many pins, right? There are, if you just count them, all of them are pins, right? But we are just only having there are so many pins, right? And we can configure an interrupt in any one of these pins, right? But if you see, the strange part is that we are only having 3 interrupt service routines. So if you happen to have two interrupt pins that are belonging to the same port, you don't have separate interrupt service routines to serve them, right? So that is a problem, right? So if there are 2 pins in C, port C, that you have connected your switches with, it's not going to have separate interrupt service routines that will be raised for that particular 2 switches, right? You have to, any one of them is pressed, it is going to jump here only. Okay, and from here you need to check that which particular pin was pressed. You have to read the value manually and then decide or understand which particular pin was actually pressed, which is not the case in case of you are using an external interrupt. So these two are explicitly, if you have 2 different switches, you can just register their interrupt service routines with these 2 particular ISRs, and they are completely independent, right? Whereas if you are using 2 or more pins that belong to the same port, it will not be possible. Okay. So now think about this kind of situations where you have very like you still use the AVR microcontroller but packed inside a small form factor which only has let's say 8 pins, right? One example is this tiny 85 microcontroller which only has 8 pins, right? All the GPIO functionality, ADC, everything is all packed inside this, right? So all these pins have dual roles or like multiple roles, like so many roles a particular pin has. Right, so in these kind of cases, this becomes very tricky, and you need to very carefully implement these ISRs, right? So let's say you don't want to have extra pins that you are not using in your IoT device. And why spend money on getting more pins and not using them? And they also consume power, right? So you just want to reduce the form factor of the device, cost of the device, but you have to implement the firmware extremely intelligently, right? You want to maximize the resources that are there in the hardware. So in these cases you have to see, right, there is only one port that is available, port B in this example, and you have to see that how do you handle such cases, right? If you have a microcontroller that has 3 ports, you can always keep 3 different switches in 3 different ports, but that is not something that much luxury you might not have all the time. Okay, so this is a little bit about the pin change interrupt, and then we can do a simple case study and then we can wrap up today. So I started a little bit late, so I'll try to finish off this exercise. So this is just interfacing a legacy keyboard and just trying to read information what key is being pressed, right, using this pin change interrupt. So this is a pretty common keyboard that we used to see earlier, right? So this is known as the PS2 port, and this has this 6 pins, right? That keyboard has these 6 pins that goes into the CPU or goes into the microcontroller, and out of them, for this keyboard, as long as the keyboard is concerned, we only have these 2 pins of interest. One is the clock and the other one is the data, and then there is this positive 5-volt input as well as ground. Okay, so this is a serial device which is going to send bits in sequence to the microcontroller, and we are going to see how this PCINT interrupt could be used in order to extract the data. Okay, so this is just the pin out of this particular PS2 port if you want to interface microcontroller, if you want to interface this specific kind of a keyboard. Nowadays these USB keyboards are available, but one generation back we were using the PS2 port both for the keyboard as well as the mouse. So we use something called bidirectional synchronous serial protocol, and in this the device always generates a clock signal. So the keyboard or the mouse is going to generate the clock signal, or any IoT device or any sort of a external device that is trying to talk to your IoT system is going to generate the clock signal, and the data that will be coming to your system will consist of 11 bits. Okay, so this is, once we start talking about digital data transfer between devices, there is a made up protocol. Whether you use I2C or SPI or UART that we will discuss in future, there is a protocol or there is a rule by which these two devices has to communicate. It's not an analog sensor keeping on pushing values. Right? This is a digital device and it is programmed to send the data serially. So the host or the microcontroller and the device have to come up with an agreement that how they are going to receive, exchange data from each other. So there is a very specific way the data will be sent. So there are 11 bits. It will start with the first bit, which is 0. It's known as the start bit. Then there is this 8 data bits. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is basically a byte that the device is sending. Okay. Then there is a parity bit. So basically, you want to make the total number of bits odd. So based on how many were ones within the 0 to 7, I want to place the parity bit as 1 or 0, right? And then there is a stop bit, which means we are done. The data communication has been completed, right? And then there is a clock signal, and this is synchronous in between the device and the microcontroller or the host. Okay. So we'll just try to send out this data and then read this data from our keyboard in a microcontroller. Right, in this case, we are trying to read this data in this Atmega 328 microcontroller. Okay, so this is the connection. I just got hold of an old motherboard where you can snap this particular kind of a connector, or you can directly glue them right to this particular pins. Okay, and then connect is a very simple connection. We just connect the positive voltage 5 volt and ground, and on the lower part we have connected this data and clock pins to A4 and A3 pins. So where I actually try to interface this particular keyboard, right? So this is just typing a message in the serial port of the Arduino. So this keyboard is actually interfaced with Arduino using the PS2 interface, right? And we use the same source code that I've showed you. We are reading this 11 bits for every keystroke, and that is how we are reading it out. And then in the program, we are decoding it, right? So next class, we can talk a little bit more about the serial communication, and then we will discuss this I2C and SPI protocols for interfacing digital sensors, right? Earlier, we were using analog sensors and using the ADC to get the digital value. Now we are trying to interface more intelligent sensors or things like serial devices where there is already a protocol that has been agreed upon in between the host and the device. Okay, so that is going to help you transfer data through a digital bus, right? And these protocols we are going to talk about more in the next class and as a set of classes, right? When we try to interface a digital sensor, right? And then once we are done with interfacing a digital sensor, we are going to jump into the different case studies. Okay. So the last part I'm going to explain a little bit in more details in the next class. It was a little bit hasty. So particularly how you want to clear the interrupt flag and reading out the data, I am going to explain a little bit in more details in a slower way. So if you have any questions right now that you want to ask, you can ask me, or otherwise we will close the session for today.